Well, how you doing? Hope everyone's having a good day. Welcome to the show. I'm Sean Stiers. The guy in the red shirt is Bobby Hensley. Glad to have you around today. How you doing, Bobby?
I'm doing great. It's always a nice time when I get to interact with Sean Stiers.
Yeah,
Makes
it's
makes my day better.
the fun part of doing a podcast is all the technology it takes to do a podcast. It's
Well, I
like
mean, especially
simple
since you're
things
old.
like
So
internet. Simple things like internet, right? I had to reboot my whole computer just a minute ago, the whole thing, and it's like, the little I've got a Mac, so the little colored pinwheel is spinning and all that fun stuff. So
I feel like
I'm
it's a
just
humble brag about the Mac, though.
I
I
don't know
have a
about that.
Mac.
I'm not bragging about anything right now.
Sponsored by Macintosh.
Yes, I wish. Well, we've got a lot to talk about today. Turned out to be a fairly eventful day. You want the bad news or the good news first, Bobby?
I always like leading with the bad news, don't you?
Okay. All right. So we'll go with the bad news
Ooh.
first. Notre Dame announced today that Mitchell Evans, the sophomore to be tight end, had surgery to repair a broken foot. He broke his fifth metatarsal, and thanks to Google and what is it, WebMD, the metatarsal is the long bone on the outside of the foot that connects to the small toe. So it's out there. So again, we're starting with the bad news. So that's the bad. We've got a lot of different topics we're going to get to today, but that is the worst of the news that we've got for today.
Well, and hearing you read that medical explanation might have been the most intelligent thing I've ever heard you have.
Oh,
So,
thanks.
Good
Thanks,
for
smart
you.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Pronounce
right.
everything well. I don't ever go to WebMD though, because at that point it always ends with "or it could kill you." But
That's
but
probably true.
it always hurts to lose any player, especially at a position like that Notre Dame has always used so frequently.
Yeah.
So it's not good news for the program at all. Hopefully it's a quicker recovery because he's young and in shape, and all you can do is hope that you get him back sooner than later. That position though, it's a skilled position that Notre Dame frequents, but I think that they can tread water until he's ready to go.
Well, and I mean it's a position of depth, obviously. Like you
Mhm.
look at you look at the position groups, it's arguably the deepest position group they've got. I mean, they become tight end
Right.
and he had
That's
two
exactly what I
catches
was
for
gonna say.
21 yards last year, so it's not like he was heavily used. And Michael Mayer is at the top of the depth chart, and that's obviously the good news, but Evans was kind of vying for, for the spot right behind Michael Mayer, which would have meant we would have seen a lot of him. But again, it's a position of depth. So you've got Kevin Bauman potentially as the next guy. He's a junior, had a leg fracture himself last season, ended up playing in 5 games after he came back. But he had a really nice fall camp last year. But because of that injury, we never really got to see him. Kane Barong, another rising sophomore, knee injury at the end of last year. And then you've got a couple of freshmen, Eli Raridan and Holden Stays. Raridan himself had an injury. So unfortunately, this is kind of, it's been a banged up group, but again, it is a deep group. If it does end up being Kevin Bauman, just based on what we saw from him last year, there's a lot of potential there. He was a huge red zone target during training camp last fall, and then, again, ends up with the injury. So it never really took off for him. So you hope that Mitchell Evans, can get healthy as soon as possible. Foot injury, you just don't know, especially when you're talking about those small bones like that. Like the Liz Frank is probably the one that we've heard the most of. But, again, you're still talking about a smaller bone in your foot. Hopefully, it things come together. There is some time between now and training camp, although we're getting closer to training camp, 51 days away, from the start of the season. So camp's going to be on us here pretty soon. But again, it's a position of depth. And you just, with all especially with the running backs who have been injured, you just don't want to keep hearing about more injuries to these guys.
Well, you never want injury before camp, especially now. But I think the worst part of this injury is to Evans himself, because like you said, these other guys now might jump in and be able to jump him. And then now where does he fit in the depth chart once he's healthy? Is he still going to get the same shot that he had before? So that, next man in is always the mentality. And they're getting a shot now, and good for them. So who knows where he'll actually. So I think he might be hurt worse than the team. I mean, physically pain, but also I think it'll be interesting to see
Right,
where he ends
because
up
of the
on depth
depth and yeah, exactly. I'll take this time to just throw out the quick reminder, like us, subscribe on YouTube. It helps us out quite a bit. Podcast platforms as well. You can follow us, rate, and all that kind of good stuff. Throw your comments out there. Bobby hasn't seen a good comment yet, so throw Bobby a comment if you'd like. But it really does help us. So that's my quick PSA at the top here. Now the good news: Sean Stiffler announced as Notre Dame's new baseball coach today, and went over to the press conference first time. Got to see him in person for the first time. Really, like based on the photoshopped images we've seen with him and the Notre Dame cap and all that different stuff. He didn't necessarily look exactly what I thought he would look like in person. He's got more hair than me, but he's got as much gray hair as me. And this is a guy who's 43 years old, been around a while, been at Virginia Commonwealth, really good track record at Virginia Commonwealth. And I think the thing that not obviously, but the thing that stood out to me the most, he talked about pitching and defense. And those are going to be the things that are going to drive this team. And, that's what drove his teams at Virginia Commonwealth. It's what's driven this team here at Notre Dame the past couple of years under Link Jarrett. His pitching staff finished in the top 3 in ERA in the Atlantic 10 in each of his last 7 full seasons. So like you throw out 2020 for COVID, and they were also in the top 3 in fielding percentage in 7 of his last 9 full seasons. So they've been really good, and they've been to the NCAA tournament the last couple of years. They built it on pitching and defense, and that's always been to me the place to start. And I think a couple of the coaches, Mick Aoki and Dave Schrag, kind of got away from that blueprint a little bit. That's kind of what, again, like you go back to Maneri and Murphy, they built it on that, had a lot of success. Link Jarrett built it on that, obviously had ultimate success. And now Sean Stiffler basically talking about the same thing. And he's a guy with a pitching background as well. So you can see why he would put a lot of emphasis on pitching.
Well, you always want to win. So like you can say pitching and defense, but if you get recruits that are better hitters, you're going to go with that too. I don't think you can build a program on that, but it's interesting. I mean, I'm glad they got their guy. It wasn't that long of a search. So that's nice. And the program. So we talked about before how Link Jarrett won't be hotter than what he is right now. Maybe he's done everything he can do for Notre Dame baseball. And that's why his stock was so high, but also the program stock is high because they were the ones that actually made the World Series, Notre Dame. So it's a lucrative place for someone to go, perhaps, because it's no longer a sleeping power. I mean, they have success recently, so it'll be interesting to see what he can do with losing some key pieces. But, it'll be interesting to see what they can do down the stretch with this guy.
Yeah, David Penny asked what the A10 is like in baseball. And, we're not going to, confuse the A10 with a power conference by any means. By and large, it is a one-bid league. But they play like Virginia Commonwealth itself. That league is kind of spread out a little bit. You've got some northern programs in there. They play they play Virginia every year. They typically play North Carolina. They play Florida State. They play some of those. They play a lot of the southern schools. Some of them in midweek games, some of them sometimes on the weekends early in the season, like everybody else. But they have the same ERA as Notre Dame this season. They tied for ninth in the nation, I think it was, in ERA at 3.91, and they went to the NCAA tournament, and they knocked off Georgia in their first game. They beat North Carolina in their second game, and then all they needed to do was win one more game. They were going to go to a super regional. Unfortunately for them, they lost the next 2 games to North Carolina. But it's a Virginia Commonwealth program that has been relatively short on long-term success, but he's taken them to 3 NCAA tournaments since 2015, and the program's only super regional. So I think that there's, when you look at his overall track record, there's more on his resume than even Link Jarrett had coming out of UNC Greensboro a few years back.
Well, and that's kind of what you're getting at it, but like all you can do is beat the teams that you play. And if you can elevate your program and your conference to be the top of the conference and be a perennial power, that says something about you.
Right.
So if he can do that there, then you go to a bigger program and a bigger conference and just repeat the process. That's how all of this works, especially in baseball. If he can build Notre Dame into continued success, even beyond this, I don't see why he can't. He's already had the track record of it. So I think you're looking at a guy that's already kind of proven himself in the only ways he can. And that's what you have to do, is give the guy a shot and see where he ends up.
Marcus Freeman was there today. He talked about Sean Stiffler talked about growing up in Western Pennsylvania and seeing Ron Paulus play quarterback, and Paulus was actually there. He mentioned Ron Paulus, and everyone's like, "Hey, he's in the back of the room." So that was kind of
that's cool, and it's always nice to have the Notre Dame backing. And like I said, no matter what sport, Notre Dame's always the brand, and it's always a power. So like you can recruit based off of that. So if he's as good as he was at his previous place, building them up in the A-10, hopefully it's the same here.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see. He had a lot of good things to say. Not afraid of the things that maybe detractors would say about Notre Dame and that kind of stuff. Just listening to him, he's obviously got to go out and do it now. But I like I like the direction they went. He also talked about leaning on Brian O'Connor, a former Notre Dame assistant who's been the head coach at Virginia since 2004, and he kind of talked to him a little bit about all this.
Well, and I'm saying, like, it's really cool to have that backing, though, like that Freeman was there and stuff. Like, it's just nice that they're
a lot of coaches from the different sports were there. Yep. That was pretty cool. All right. It's been 2 weeks since the rumble across college football began. USC and UCLA and all that. We've got 51 days to go until Notre Dame and Ohio State. So let's get into the meat and potatoes. First, before we get to, I guess, what's going to be our main topic today, the Twitter poll that we did, after all the USC, UCLA, Big Ten, college football world's imploding news 2 weeks ago, things have calmed down quite a bit. Bobby, do you think that we're going to hear any what you would call substantial new news along those lines before training camps actually open up in less than a month now?
No, and I tell you why. I don't know how many more moves. The only move that could be made that would make ripples at this point is Notre Dame going to a conference. You already have Texas and Oklahoma. You already have UCLA and USC. I argue even less of those two. But there's not that many blue blood programs or the big fish out there to be cast into these conferences. I guess the only other caveat could possibly be if the Pac-12 and Big 12 unite for something.
Yeah,
but I think
I don't see that coming together in this amount of time, though.
Right.
It's like at this point, I think everyone now is kind of focused on, okay, the season's coming up, training camp's coming up. So I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon either.
And any of the moves that they've been making, I mean, they're huge, but they're still a year and a half, 2 years away. So it's not like, okay, well, they have to hurry up and settle this conference by the beginning of the season. There still could be stuff that comes down the pipe during the season or between the season and the bowls, the big bowls. Obviously, there's a bowl game every day now once you get to the end of the season. But I think that before the season, there's no way. I think everything's settled. There's not that many pieces that can move unless it's a conference realignment on the lower level, which isn't as big, or Notre Dame joining, which they're not going to do right now. So, no, I completely think everything's settled for now. We can just get on track with looking at football and who can beat who this year.
Well, it's, and like that, the Notre Dame piece to this whole thing and whether or not they're going to move. And now, again, we're going to, that's kind of part of our topic for today, but you're talking about maybe even 2 years out before they really, again, unless some other big ripple, comes from someplace and, like the SEC yanks away Clemson or Florida State or whatever, something like that. Notre Dame's got some time because of because the fact that their TV contract and the college football playoff current contract both end at the same time after the 2025 season. So, I mean, again, unless some other, big bomb drops in some other spot that maybe kind of forces Notre Dame's hand to some extent, I think we're probably, even looking at a couple of years out before something really has to happen.
Well, it's like Irish Chi-Town asked, is the Pac-12 on life support? I think they absolutely are. But again, everything is 2 years down. You have a time period that you can wait now, because who's going to join them? The Pac or the Big 12 and the Pac-12? They have time to sort out, because I think by the end of the next year, maybe some of those programs will leave and the Pac-12 might just dissolve. And some of the programs go to the Big 12 and they rebrand themselves, or some go to the ACC, because obviously regional bias doesn't matter anymore for these conferences.
Right.
They can go national. So I think that right now everybody's focused on what's coming this year. Yeah, I think a lot of the conferences are on life support. I think all of college football is, if you're not in the Big 10, Notre Dame, or the SEC. But I don't see anything changing between now and the end of this playing season.
I agree.
I think the next news you'll get before you get more conference news will be about the playoff expanding. I think that'll be the next thing towards the end of the year.
See, I don't even think that's going to happen before the end of the year, because again, the Big 10 and the SEC they're really going to drive this whole thing. That's where they hold the cards. But again, just based on the things that we've heard, it's there seems to be a place still for Notre Dame in there because of Greg Sankey and the SEC wanting to prevent Notre Dame from jumping over to the
just
Big
a block
10.
Move.
But
yeah.
that's like they need it. Whatever happens, there's supposed to be a majority of the conference commissioners voting on it to approve whatever the new contract is going. But again, that doesn't expire until after 2025 either, so they have some time on that. And now I think that probably all shakes out somewhat, maybe within the next year or so, because I think they were initially hoping that maybe something was going to happen by next year. But then when all this stuff happened a couple of weeks ago, it definitely put things on the back burner, because the Big 10 and the SEC can basically say, well, this is what we want. Like we want 3 teams we want 3 of our teams, per conference, or 4 of our teams, whatever it happens to do. And we're going to go to 12. And if everybody else votes no, then they can just say, well, we've got the majority of the best teams. We'll just go and do our own thing over here, and we'll take whatever money, we can get out of it. And it'll be big because people would pay to see it.
Right. Well, I think what you're talking,
TV would pay to see it.
Well, people would in person too. I mean, it's just, they hold all the cards. They almost have this whole playoff hostage right now. Yeah. I think that I could see the playoff though this year, depending on how the year goes. But every year it seems like the outcry is for more and more teams to join. But this has been going on for 50 years or more, because it was always, we need a playoff, and then they got the 1 versus 2, and then it was like, that's not enough. Then they expanded to 4. Now, I think every year you're seeing more and more reasons why they can make compelling arguments to expand. But I guess you're right. Until all the teams settle, what can you really expand to? Because you can't just be like, all right, let's go to 8, and then Pac-12's in, and then next year Pac-12 is not going to even exist. And so then you get to a situation where it could get dicey. And I think with the conferences, you might say they want 3 people guaranteed, or 3 teams guaranteed, or whatever. I could see that, because there's no guarantee the conferences are going to be like 8-8 to be 16. It could be 4-4, 4-4, and then the winner of that little pool advances, or who knows how it changes down the road. I mean, we can all fantasy book it all we want, but until everything's settled and we know the number of teams and the conferences involved, it's all just like a fantasy game that we don't know the answers.
It is. Matthew Berry will be tracking it, not on ESPN, but
somewhere
else. Somewhere else.
Starting his own thing, probably.
So here's our question of the day, and it kind of ties in to this. Here's the question. Put it out on Twitter earlier today. We touched on this early in the week. I thought we'd kind of open it up a little bit more, though, and try to get more actual fan feedback out of this. So I put it out there, did a Twitter poll today, asked this question. Would you rather see, if you're a Notre Dame fan, would you rather see Notre Dame join the Big 10 full-time and be guaranteed 1 national championship in, say, the next 15 years, or stay independent and not know if they will ever win a championship again? You're already smiling. I want to read a couple responses before we get started here, okay? P-Wagon says, I'll join anything if it guarantees an Irish natty. Counter to that, Sports Talk Drew, guaranteed, and he put in quotes, a national championship. Give me independence because I want to win more than one in the next 15 years. Clutch Sports, Notre Dame. 15 years is a long time to only win one natty. I would rather stay independent and win multiple. The state of the program feels like it's on an upward trajectory. I don't want to compromise that. And to an extent, okay, I get what you're saying, but here's what I don't get about those comments. Maybe you're thinking the same thing. Yes, 15 years is a long time to be guaranteed one national championship.
How long has it been?
It's been 34 years, Bobby. 34 years since they last won a national championship. You were what, still in diapers when they won a national championship?
I was actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you're in diapers now, so.
So, it's like you may want more than one championship in the next 15 years, but they haven't won any in more than twice as much amount of time. So I don't get that. Because again, it's one thing to want it, but it's another thing for it to, to feasibly be able to happen. And that's why I put 15 years, part of why I put 15 years on this, because again, it's been 34. Yeah, all the signs are pointing in the right direction that they're trending toward, being a more legitimate contender. But like I was just watching the Four Falls of Buffalo, the great 30 for 30 about the Buffalo Bills. They went to 4 straight Super Bowls, didn't win one. So, like you could go to the playoff 4 years in a row and get bounced in the first round. You could get bounced in the championship. Just getting there is hard enough. And then you've got to win once you get there. So to me, it's a no-brainer the other way. What do you think about it?
Well, I don't like when we agree, and it's not great for our discussion points. But it's like D. Hawk said. He goes, "Is a championship. That's the point." So That's great. Let's win a championship. Let's take one because they haven't won one in so many years. And, some of those comments that you're reading, even the ones that were like, because the wording.
Hold on. I want to clarify some simple math because A100 says 34 plus 15 equals 49. Your proposal could extend the drought more than 48 years. Yes, could, but you could also win it next year, and that would be year one of those 15 years. So you could also end the drought at 35, right?
Right.
So,
and you would have one championship in 48 years. And to be honest, how many programs have won in 48 years?
And that's it. Well, I mean, I'm a Kansas City Royals fan. They went 30 years in between championships, and I never thought that I would even see them get there. I was pretty happy just seeing them get to Game 7 of the World Series the year before they won, and then they won it the next year. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, and it's been, what are we sitting at now? 26 years since they left. I would sign up for one in the next 15 years, and even if it meant I would have to go, like another 15 after that.
I'd wave that wand again to give me a magical
Miami
one.
Dolphins fan. They have never won a Super Bowl in your lifetime, right? Would you sign up for one in the next 15 years right now?
Hell, with Tom Brady in the division, I would have waved the wand to get me one division championship in 15 years. Yes, you have to take the championship. Why wouldn't you take? See, and here's the other thing that's key. You're saying that it would have to at least win 2 to make it not worth taking this guaranteed one.
Right.
And
you don't even have one guaranteed in that scenario.
But as I'm saying, so like how many teams have had 2 in 15 years? None. Well, I mean, outside of the few that got it. Yep. So I just don't understand why you wouldn't just take the one. And if, maybe it splits perfectly 7 or 8 years in, and then you don't feel that bad and you can win another one outside of that. You have to fantasy take that one because that's what you want to do. And
you want the championship, right?
You win the championship, and there's no guarantee. And then here's the other one. So you have to either win 0 or 2 or more. And I just don't see many teams at all the way that college football is going, winning 2 or more, especially if they expand the playoff.
I mean, you have more of a chance. It's basically Alabama and Clemson. The only multiples in recent years. Those are the only teams doing it.
And that's what I say. And do you think in the next 15 years, Clemson has a shot at winning 2 of them? They're already kind of falling down last year. So I don't think that Notre Dame or outside of Alabama right now, and they could fall because Saban's old and who knows how long he'll be there. But any other program in the nation, you wouldn't, if you had to put $100 on a team to win 2 championships in 15 years, how many would?
Yeah. Vigo says being regionalized by the Big Ten will kill off Notre Dame's mystique, bro. But are they really being regionalized in this expanded Big Ten? Because we're talking about them joining the Big Ten. Prior to 2 weeks ago, when you got the Los Angeles market, then yeah, you were regionalized. But as if you're in the Big Ten with USC and UCLA, you're still making trips out to the West Coast every year.
And that's what Notre Dame does already. So I don't see them being regionalized. Plus, they have so many open games that they could schedule people. They could dip into an SEC game every year. They could play another Big Ten opponent or two, including USC.
I think it changes your scheduling philosophy for one. Like how are you going to schedule your non-conference? Because you're going to have in a Big Ten that big, you're going to have at least 9 games, and that leaves you 3 non-conference games to schedule. Now, if you're in there with USC, assuming the Big Ten, helps you accommodate, that rivalry, then you're still playing them every year. So, you've got Navy. You're still going to take care of Navy.
Even regionalized. What does that even mean anymore? Is that just for going to games and getting fans at the game, at the physical game? Because TV ratings is and the way that you watch television is easier and easier. You're watching this show on YouTube right now. So the fact that I don't think that there's a whole lot of regionalization anymore in football, except for going to the game,
and that's part of this, when we're talking about super conferences, and there is no, with the SEC is still somewhat regionalized, even though it obviously the footprint continues to expand. But the Big Ten is just all over the place
right
now. So it's completely different. And, like I'm looking at some of Vigo's comments here in the chat, and I agree to an extent with some of what he's saying. Like, I'm just putting this up as a thought question with the national championship being part of it, because there's all this anti-Big Ten stuff. So that's why I asked the question. Okay, but if you said, I'm going to guarantee you're going to win a national championship in the next 15 years after you join the Big Ten, but if you stay independent, you're not guaranteed anything. That's why the question, because that's where the dilemma is, because I don't want to see Notre Dame join the Big Ten either. But when you attach it like this, if I told you you're going to be guaranteed a championship, would it be worth it? To me, it is, because you play to what? Win the game, right?
Yeah, and
win the championship.
And a schedule inside that Big Ten to win the championship, and then through the playoff, that's a lot of marquee games. It's a lot of big matchups. It'd be a fun year to watch your team win one. And I don't know if you are not going to win any in 15 years, or even if you win one on your own without the Big Ten, it's still awesome, but you weren't guaranteed it, and it's almost like a scary thought. Whereas if you're just guaranteed one, sure, let's take it. Let's roll with one. Why not win a championship? And then that could propel, like I say, like if you win it 7-8 years in, maybe you get some recruiting classes, and then after that 15 years that you only get the one, you could win more after that.
So I did a Twitter poll. I mentioned that. Here's what's interesting about the Twitter poll that I did today. Of the people who commented, I don't know if they voted or not, but of the people who commented, retweeted, whatever with their comments, the majority were against joining the Big Ten and taking the national championship. But in the actual Twitter poll itself, now we didn't have as many people vote in this as we've had in some of our past polls, but over 100 voted. 73% of the people who voted said join the Big Ten. Only 27% said stay independent. So, like, as long as they could stay anonymous.
Yeah, they wanted to win that championship.
That's right. They take the championship. They want the championship. But when they put their name to it, more people, are like, no. There's no way I want the Big Ten.
Yeah, and the Big Ten, it's always such a weird dynamic between Notre Dame and the Big Ten, because it's been going on for how many years now between the two of them. And, it's almost like they both, like the Big Ten's like, we don't want Notre Dame. And Notre Dame's like, well, I don't want to join the Big Ten. But if there's championship, that almost helps all involved, a guaranteed championship.
Yeah. We are not, Marshall says, one championship the next 15 years. I want to be alive for the next title. If Notre Dame bookended 2 natties in my lifetime, would suck. Yeah. So, Father David Penny, 100% join if it means a title, and it's one guaranteed, not one only. Yeah, that's exactly right. You're guaranteed one. You
Yeah,
could
so
still
I
win
guess
more than that. Yep, maybe it
so
could be more. That's
yeah.
exactly right. Here's some of the comments from Twitter. I loathe the Big Ten, but if you're guaranteeing a championship, I'll learn to like the conference. My preference would be independence, but a guarantee of a national championship makes this a no-brainer. I'm a 30-year-old who would love to see at least one in my lifetime. Michael says that's not a tough decision. And that's all he said. He didn't say he didn't say how he would actually answer it. He just said that's not a tough decision.
And it's not. Why wouldn't you just take a
You're
guaranteed
right, Michael. It's
championship?
not take the championship.
Yeah,
that's right.
that's
Dance
right.
with the devil in the Big Ten
Well,
and take the championship.
The comments that say, well, I don't like the Big Ten. You don't have to like the Big Ten. That's almost the beauty of it. You're getting Notre Dame infiltrating it, and they can knock out all the other Big Ten teams and beat them in all the games that they have to play against.
It's almost like joining up with the ACC a couple of years ago, and you could say, hey, we joined your ACC for a year, and we ran the table in the regular season, and we went to the college football playoff. See? Yeah. So like if under this scenario, after all this, anti-Notre Dame, you need to be in a conference and whatever else, and now you're going to join the Big Ten and you're going to win a national championship, then you can just rub it right in everybody's noses. Right?
Exactly. It almost elevates your program and what you thought of yourself because, like you just said, you can be like, hey, Big Ten, we joined you and we won a championship. When was the last time you had one? Because at this point, who knows how many years it could be down the road.
That's exactly right. Ryan on Twitter said independent. It just means more. Someone else said, can't it also mean Michigan or USC won't ever get a championship? Then I'm in. I mean, you can look at it.
You'd be knocking them out because you're in the Big Ten,
right? I mean, I guess we can change the preferences to be whatever you wanted. Someone else said my first preference would be to stay independent, but if it were forced into a conference, the Big Ten makes the most sense from a competitive standpoint.
It's just kind of interesting how the comments go because it's not necessarily even about the love of Notre Dame and guaranteeing the championship. It's almost driven by the hatred of the Big Ten programs and the Big Ten conference. So you're talking about hatred versus guaranteeing yourself a championship. I say get over yourself and take the championship.
Same. I'm the same. D-Hawk says as long as they have a TV partner and a path to the playoff, there's no real point of joining a conference. I mean, that's absolutely right.
Versus winning it are different, though.
Right. That's kind of outside this conversation. But, yeah, I mean, the path to the playoff is still what has to be resolved. Like we said, we don't even know what a new playoff is going to look like. And there's no way that with these overbloated conferences that we have right now, the Big Ten and the SEC, there's no way it's going to stay at only 4. But the problem is, okay, again, you go back, the SEC and the Big Ten want to expand it. And the SEC a year ago, when they had the working group that Jack Swarbrick was a part of, they wanted to expand it, but selfishly because they wanted the chance for more SEC teams to get in. They were already getting multiples every now and then, Georgia and Alabama, they wanted even more. And so if this format expands now with the SEC and the Big Ten having as much power as they already have, they're going to make sure that they're going to get their share of entrance in that playoff. And again, so like how many at-large spots does that leave everybody else? That's going to be a big question that's going to have to be answered when they get in that room and start debating all of this stuff.
Well, I think you just went in a circular way of explaining why the SEC will always allow Notre Dame to be a program that can join the playoff. Because they're saying, okay, if we block Notre Dame, then they're just going to have to join a conference and they're going to join the Big Ten. And then that's a huge pin in the Big Ten. I'm not talking about, I see a lot of comments about how that everybody just wants to stay independent, which, okay, but that if you had to join a conference, it was your only way to get in and to the playoff and then perhaps win a championship. Because otherwise you're just playing all year. And if they block you, you can't make the playoff.
Right.
But SEC saying will always allow Notre Dame in because they don't want them to join the Big Ten. So it makes a lot of sense from the SEC's perspective to allow Notre Dame for now, the way that everything is set up, to be one of those programs that they can have a viable option and be part of the playoff. But it's also interesting that the playoff is independent of NCAA football, which is weird to think of.
that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Right. But
That's a
I'm
whole nother
saying,
rabbit. But
so they
again,
make their own rules.
that's where the Big Ten and the SEC are taking over the college football world, and is it actually going to come to two conferences, literally running everything? You're either in the Big Ten or you're in the SEC, and like the Big Ten has a Fox contract, and the SEC has its ESPN, ABC contract, kind of like AFC and NFC, and how all that's going to,
Yeah.
but that's part of this too, is with the power that the Big Ten is garnering from all this TV money from Fox. Again, with this current contract, everything is on ESPN or ABC. I think Fox wants to be a player in this next and I think that there was at least, last year there was a desire to try to get another TV partner involved because you get more money out of the whole thing. But I think Fox wants to be a player in this as well, like when it comes to televising the playoff games and stuff like, just like, again, because like when you look at all the other sports right now, baseball is the extreme model where you've just, on any given night, you've got games on 3 different networks or whatever. But, even NFL playoffs, you've got all the networks involved in, in the early rounds with the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. But, like, could it come to, when you get to the semifinal, Fox has one, ESPN has the other, and then they alternate every other year for who's televising the national championship. So I could easily see that happening.
Yeah, and look at the NFL model. Well, first of all, every network wants to be a part of college football because outside of the NFL, it's probably the most lucrative sports entity that they can bring on. And then you look at the way the NFL rotates the Super Bowl through things, and who knows what's coming down the pipe for all of the sports. So you could see stuff on Amazon if they throw out, $1 bazillion to air something, and then you have to subscribe to watch. I don't think we're there now, but I think that that's coming eventually. They're already doing Thursday Night Football, and they've been dabbling with football here and there. So every network wants to be a part of it. I think that obviously we're spiraling the conversation here from the playoff, from Notre Dame having a conference. The money is what's going to drive the bus for everybody.
Yeah.
I don't even think Notre Dame
the most pure way on this whole thing.
Yeah.
TV money is behind this whole thing. Right. Like if you look at there's a lot out there that's been reported about how just like the report that came out, I think it was when you and I were last, the swim website, with the story about how ESPN was trying to, to get Clemson and Florida State and these schools out of the ACC and, break up their contract and all that stuff. One, I don't think that ESPN was, going to try to get out of a contract that was very, very fair to them, less money that they had to pay. But these TV networks are pushing a lot of this, and maybe not even just a lot of this, almost all of it, because it's the money that's being involved. And, again, if you're in the Big Ten, if you're a team in the Big Ten knows they're going to have those markets. And as we've talked about before, the Big Ten footprint now has the 3 biggest markets in the country: Los Angeles, after getting the 2 LA schools, Chicago, and New York. And that is major money and a major coup for the Big Ten to be able to pull, and for Fox basically to be able to pull that off.
Well, Fox is interesting because I think that they made some wrong moves, and it wasn't their fault. I think the Big 12 kind of disintegrated, and they were trying to go towards that. So then they started to do the Big 10 a little bit more and elevated games to the big noon kickoff. The Big 12 is interesting to me because they've just been pillaging and trying to stay alive for a while now, but they seem pretty devoted to having a conference, whereas the Pac-12, it's like, well, who are they going to get anymore? And does that hurt Fox? Because Fox has the Pac-12 championship game. So are they going to be losing these marquee things? And does that almost shuffle them out unless they're able to buy in a big way the next couple of years with some sort of a contract, and maybe to rotate the championship game or something like that? But otherwise, I think Fox might be a little bit behind the cue ball here.
We'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. SEC Media Days start Monday. And longtime college sports writer Matt Hayes says that Greg Sankey, SEC commissioner, should just start off Media Days next week, go to the podium, end all the ongoing speculation, and just say there will be no more expansion. There will be no more conference implosion, not from the SEC, because the SEC is going to stand pat at 16 teams. Matt Hayes says that Greg Sankey could just end all of this speculation and confusion and everything else. What do you think about that?
I think that would be wonderful for this year because everybody's, like I say, fantasy thinking of what could happen and where's everybody going and what does this mean for this or next. It'd just be nice for him to say that for this year so that they can just focus on football, I think. And plus, we're pretty sure nothing else in the SEC is going to happen anyway. So why not just announce it, say you're locked in for now, maybe, leave the wording a little bit better so that you can add something
Right.
after the year. But just say right now we're standing pat, we're good. We don't want to take the focus off of this season, and the SEC is hoping to have the national championship come home to our conference with how everything is right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's very pie in the sky. And,
Sure.
and again, like we started this thing off, neither one of us think that anything major is going to happen before the season actually starts. At this point, we basically saw the equivalent of what we got a year ago with Texas and Oklahoma with USC and UCLA. But yeah, I don't see it happening. Yeah, I think that he could, Greg Sankey could go to the microphone and say something like that. I don't think it'll happen, but
no. And
I don't know. I'm just glad. One, this whole topic, it's been 2 weeks now. This has given us a lot of stuff to talk about. That it's like the middle of July.
I was just thinking that.
Where all of our listeners are always giving us a hard time anytime we start to talk a little bit of baseball. It's like this is giving us a lot of football content to talk about these last couple of weeks. So I'm kind of glad for that.
Well, like I said, I was just saying that there's so many. Who knows who's going where, and it'd be nice if he said that so that they could just put it to bed. So especially for media day, because most of the coaches, they don't know what's going on. They're just trying to coach their team to win a game. They don't know the conference alignment in 2 years. They're not all privy to all of that.
Right. They had the whole, Nick Saban the other day, and it's like, so now we've got to, play the Nick Saban quotes and everything else. It's like the coaches are so far down on the pecking order in terms of who's actually making these decisions, right. Like someone asked me last year about, Texas and Oklahoma going to the, why are they going? The answer is always money, for one, to go back to what you were talking about before, because there's just no one was thinking, oh, let's go to the SEC because that's going to give us a chance to win more championships. That's not why they do it. They do it because what you said. It's because of the green. Dollar bill. That's right.
Do you think Vanderbilt's in the SEC for football, expecting to win a championship ever?
Well, why is Missouri in the SEC? Because the paychecks are bigger. They got tired of Texas for one thing, but then they went to the SEC because the paycheck gets bigger. They don't have to worry. It doesn't matter if they're ever competitive again because they're getting a big paycheck.
Do you think Texas A&M would have ever given that huge paycheck to Jimbo Fisher if they weren't in the SEC? He doesn't get that money to lead that program that way if they're in the Big 12 still. So across the board, it changes a lot of things in the programs and their expectations and what they're doing. But obviously the SEC was attractive and that you're going to go into Alabama and the big and LSU when they're up or Auburn when they're up, all these big programs. That's not what it's about. And the coaches aren't making that decision because the coaches would like to go and win a lot of games and keep their job for a long time. The administrators and the athletic directors, those are the people that are making the decisions to go to these conferences. It's nothing to do with the game day personnel.
D-Hawk said, I forgot Missouri was a state until Sean mentioned it. And I wish I could forget about it, but
you got to drive through Missouri to get to other places.
Or Missouri, depending on, what you want to – that's right. You have to having grown up where I grew up in Kansas, it was, it was there all the time. And now to get back to Kansas to see relatives.
Still in the way.
I've got to go
drive
through
a lot
Missouri.
shorter if it wasn't.
You just can't avoid Missouri. I guess you could avoid Missouri, but you just, you'd have to go farther into Nebraska into Nebraska. I guess, so.
Have to drive around Big Ten country then.
That's right. All right, let's hit a few rapid fire topics here before we finish tonight. NFL is pushing for flag football to be a demonstration sport in the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. They think that getting the sport to the Olympics is going to help attract more fans worldwide. Do you buy or sell flag football in the Olympics, Bobby.
I'm going to have to sell it. I understand that the product is trying to be more international, but they're not trying to get international growth of the game in terms of players or anything, just viewers. I don't think that putting it in the Olympics as an exhibition, but putting flag football in the Olympics as a competition isn't going to sell the product. Because then if you like that, and then the first game you watch and like somebody tackles a guy, you're like, whoa, what was that?
See, I would disagree with that, because for there to be, obviously it's interesting because baseball, basketball, football, American football, all sports that were invented in America, right, in the United States. But the other two sports, basketball is global. Baseball is at least somewhat global. Football is still predominantly just a United States sport, a United States phenomena. And the only way that basically their goal is to try to make $1 billion in annual revenue off, the NFL's goal worldwide. And the only way to do that is if you've got people in those countries playing football. Now, you're not going to just slap on helmets and shoulder pads and everything else and have people go out there playing football in some of these other countries where they haven't traditionally been playing it. Fair. David Penny says fair. Canada. Okay. To a lesser extent, the Canadian Football League is still there. That's true. Okay. So we'll say North America anyway, not just the United States, but predominantly the United States. But I guess my point is, if that's your goal, you're never going to get to it if you don't have people in those other countries playing the sport. So yeah, flag football structurally is different, but it's still the same sport. And if you're going to try to grow some kind of interest in it, you've got to start somewhere, I guess. And I would say the Olympics is as good a place as any, because then it gives each of those countries, goals, that, hey, we can have a team in the Olympics, that kind of thing. Now, it didn't work out that well for softball. Remember when U.S. softball team dominated everything and then they got rid of it? But so I don't, it's not a complete, I understand what you're saying. So it's maybe not a full in buy for me, but I understand what they're trying to accomplish anyway.
I just don't think the Olympics are your viable option of how to grow the sport is, I guess, the bigger picture to me. Because like they already most of the world has rugby that they love and endure in every country. And I know it's not the same as football. I'm not even trying to say they're close, but the physicality of rugby, could be similar to what you see in football, but I don't think that the Olympics are the way to do it. It's almost more like, I think you'd get more fans and I know I don't care about logistics. That's not my job to figure out. But if you were to have more exhibition football games, maybe move like one game a year to a different country, you would get more fans that way, I feel like, than having an exhibition of flag football in the Olympics.
Well, but by having it in the Olympics, it's not just a game. You're encouraging, leagues to form in every country so that every country can have an entrant, and you can also have male and female and everything else with flag football. So
all inclusion, and the stage for the Olympics too. The viewership is different than a normal sporting event. What I always say watching the Olympics is you're not getting sports fans watching most of them. It's more of the stories of what's going
on. Casual fans.
I don't even think casual.
What draws eyeballs? What draws eyeballs to TV? Casual fans.
I don't even think I think it's even more than that. I think it's people that don't even like sports that'll watch figure skating, stuff. So I understand your point. And the more eyeballs you get on any product's a good thing. So I guess I could see it. It just seems so weird that it would be an exhibition. It wasn't even a real thing. And then how they set it up, I could see that it could be beneficial because, like I say, any eyeball is a good eyeball and anything can be better, but it's still not really the product. So what are you selling? More people might be disappointed watching it there, and then when they watch the NFL, because it's different.
Yeah. David Penny says it's regular people watching, not us sports nuts. Yes, regular people. Regular being the key. Pittsburgh's Heinz Field is no more. It's gone away. There won't be that big thing of ketchup out there anymore. It's going to be called Acrisure Stadium because Heinz decided they didn't want the naming rights anymore. Fill in the blank. The worst venue name change in sports history is blank.
Wrigley Field, hate that place. Who wants a gum company? No, I'm joking. Actually, if you go across town, though, Guarantee Rate Field.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're setting me up on this one. I felt like that. It's fine, but
I honestly couldn't
changed,
think of anything worse
I
than
know that's
going
great.
Comiskey to U.S.
Well,
Cellular when they called it the Cell, and then to Guaranteed Rate Field.
I mean, Kauffman Stadium's not a great name either. I'm joking. The thing about the White Sox name change that really sucked is when you drove by it on the Dan Ryan, all you saw outside their stadium was a big red arrow pointing down. And that the name change was bad enough, but once you added that arrow, it's not what you want for your friend. It's a bad look everywhere. It's a bad logo.
I agree. I just, like I said, I don't know that there is a worse name change, but again, like Acrisure, actually, it's like I had to Google what Acrisure even is, but I guess they've accomplished their goal just by putting their name on it, because now people are looking it up to see what it is.
Well, but it wasn't like it was Steeler Stadium and now they sold out to get a sponsor. Heinz Field was already
They're just
sponsored.
switching it. Yeah.
So I don't think it's that big of a dramatic change. I mean, it's just a different sponsorship. Just because you're used to one doesn't make the sponsor better. Like if Notre Dame Stadium became, some brand, the Coca-Cola Notre Dame Stadium or something, that's a big deal. But I don't think changing a name from one brand to another is even a bad look for Pittsburgh.
Yeah. The Derek Jeter docuseries is coming to ESPN next week. It's going to be called The Captain. It's going to debut after next Monday night's Home Run Derby, which means it's going to be on relatively late by the time it's all said and done, because it seems like those derbies never end early. But which are you more interested in, Home Run Derby or the launch of the Derek Jeter series that's coming after it?
Well, I'm just a little sad I don't get my celebrity softball game after the Home Run Derby that usually comes on. I think it's the Home Run Derby I'll be more interested in on that night, because you can stream that Jeter documentary whenever you want without commercials too. Whereas the Home Run Derby, they've made it into a kind of an exciting event. Now, I am very interested in the Jeter documentary, maybe even overall, but I like to stack up a few episodes so I can stream them all at once, and then I don't have to watch commercials.
Are you a Jeter fan? Like, do you like Jeter?
No.
Did you like Jeter?
No.
Yeah, I just
Kalamazoo boy though.
Not a Yankees guy
Midwest
at
guy.
all, and he just always came off as, he's a good player.
He was
kind of boring to me.
He's a good player, but if Derek Jeter has those same stats on the Kansas City Royals, what's his national appeal?
I agree.
Or if he's out west in San Diego or on the Angels, what's his appeal then?
Take him out of a Yankees uniform. That's right.
And the team around him was so tremendously talented and good, his regime, that I think that was part of what made him what he was. Because if he has those same numbers but doesn't win the championships and flip it, he's in Oakland and somebody else throws him out at home, I don't think we look at him the same way. Is he still a Hall of Famer? Absolutely. But I don't think that we look at him the way we do. Plus, to me, the way he managed the Miami Marlins situation kind of put a sour taste in my mouth about him.
I just, I'm interested. I think I'm more interested in the Jeter thing because there's only so much Home Run Derby that I can watch. But, it's batting practice, basically. I am interested in some of this. Like he's going to talk about, some of A-Rod stuff. That's going to be in there. Now, this is long. I think it's like at least 6 episodes. It's not all going to obviously air on the same night, but he's going to talk about that. He's going to talk about the infamous gift baskets. You've heard that story, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe part of that's just pure jealousy on my part that I wish that I could live a life that's like, all right, here's your gift basket after our lovely evening together. And thanks for dropping off your cell phone on the way in so that you can't record anything.
Yeah.
But you're talking about this. His biggest play, I think, that he made against the Athletics in the playoffs, he was out of position to flip it to home. He shouldn't even have been that close to the plate.
I've always argued, well, not the one to flip it home, I guess, but that other one where he goes into the stands. If there's not like only 4 feet in foul territory, it's like, okay, he ran and caught the ball. He did his job, basically. But that whole thing has just been so overblown because there happened to be a short wall there. It's not like he risked his life running through that wall. I mean, he made a catch. That's what he's supposed to do. And it only looked more dramatic because there was a low wall and there wasn't that much room in foul territory.
And then he just went and did his job, and everybody acts like he was like that play made him a Hall of Famer.
Yes.
I feel like he was always really good when the lights were on, and I'm just pretty sour against him, so that's just my bias coming out. But yeah,
right.
Okay, in the playoffs he'd play well, but how hard was he playing? Would he have made that same catch in August in a game that didn't mean as much?
Yeah.
But Yankee Stadium in the playoffs was always a big stage, I guess.
I want to get this Tony La Russa stuff in here for you, since you are such a big White Sox fan. And,
all right, it was good talking with you. Have a good day.
So first, Shane, is it Reardon? I don't know how you say his name, from The Score in Chicago. He's guaranteeing that Tony La Russa is not going to finish the season as the manager of the White Sox. And then last night, did you see this on Twitter last night?
I think, yeah. Ozzie.
Okay, so former White Sox manager Ozzie Guillen, for people not in the Chicago market, he's one of the co-hosts of the White Sox postgame show on TV. He calls La Russa, quote, Rick Renteria with credentials, end quote, on the postgame show the other night. And so longtime baseball writer John Heyman tweets, will be interesting to see if it's possible to get someone's job by insulting them on a postgame show. So Guillen responds, hate me why? Because of bad English? Because I won, am loud, good looking, rich? I don't need to insult anyone to get a job. Maybe you think I do. Tired of you putting me down. Maybe you think you can because you're privileged and I am not. What do you think about all this, Bobby? You're the White Sox fan here.
I've been around the White Sox program. I'm in college football mode. White Sox, Twitter and everything. Ozzie's always been that way. That's what made him successful when they were winning, and that's what kind of got him out of good favor when they were losing.
Mm-hmm.
He's just always been kind of fly off the handle, and it's a player's coach. Irish Hightown says, I love Ozzie. I think anyone that's a part of this White Sox fandom likes Ozzie. Obviously, he won the championship as a manager, so he gets a pass on almost everything from White Sox fans. I am intrigued what more non-White Sox fan thinks, because I don't really know how other people think of him.
Well,
but he's always been straight to the point.
Are you talking about Ozzie or are you talking about La Russa now?
Ozzie.
You're still talking about Ozzie. Okay. Yeah. I like Ozzie. I think that because he was in Chicago and because of that personality, the first time around it probably was time for him to go. And, there's all this talk about, whether he would actually, get the job now and all that kind of stuff. To me, it's more like I was surprised to see John Heyman, just lobbing volleys at Ozzie Guillen out of all this. This is a guy who's been around for a long time, and he's never been, like an over-the-top hot take type guy, but like the fact that he's equating Ozzie Guillen saying what he said on a White Sox post-game show, this is part of the White Sox TV contract, this post-game show, and they appear to be fine with it, or at least nothing has happened so far. So I'm surprised that John Heyman came at Ozzie Guillen so quickly. I don't know if Ozzie, actually is doing this, to lobby for a job, but you and I have talked about Tony La Russa before. Tony La Russa, I don't think has any business being in a major league dugout, clubhouse, whatever anymore. I think it's painfully obvious right now that his time has passed. And, where this White Sox team is, they need something to kick him into gear. And Ozzie Guillen, would be convenient. He's right there. So.
Yeah.
You're the Sox fan. So what do you
say it's tough because I don't think that Ozzie, even if they get rid of La Russa, which I think they should, I'm not disagreeing with that part. I don't think Ozzie's your guy. He's not, according to the White Sox, he's probably not old enough, and he does not have a filter. But they're trying to. I mean, they hired La Russa. It's so old that it's like I don't know. I think that if you get rid of La Russa, it's because you have Madden and the waiting in the wings. That would be a good hire. Even at this point in the season, maybe he could turn it around, make him.
Madden's a free agent right now.
And that's what I'm saying. And the Angels were as bad enough that they fired him, but the Angels have their winning percent is .08 since they fired him. So I think that the only way that La Russa doesn't make is if they have somebody they can plug in, and that I think Madden would be wonderful. Ozzie would be good. You almost don't want him to come back because he had a good run. I don't think you need him to come back. It's almost what La Russa did. You don't need a guy that's been out of the game for a while to come back and see if they have any shine left on him. I think that you gotta.
I guarantee you this. If they had Buck Showalter, they'd be in first place right now. I guarantee it.
Well,
agree or disagree?
I disagree. I think that the White Sox this year are just really, again, I'm biased, but I think they're not playing to potential. I don't think it's a manager. I think it's a mix of injuries.
If you're not playing to potential, it's somebody's fault, right? I mean, they had injuries. You can only fall back on the injuries so long. That was early in the season.
No, part of it's the scouting and stuff. They got Josh Harrison playing second base when they could have gone after a guy like Trevor Story or got a guy that's a marquee guy to play there. Instead, They made a terrible trade last year for Cesar Hernandez, who barely even made the postseason roster. This year, the only thing they added was Josh Harrison, who's not an all-star or an everyday player even. So I think it's more in the front office of what did you expect different from last year to this year? No, I don't think that's managing.
No, fair, but I think what you're really saying is this is a dysfunctional organization, and Tony La Russa would not even be there if it weren't for the sentimentality that Reinsdorf basically said when he hired him that he didn't want to basically go to his grave regretting the fact that he fired Tony La Russa, and La Russa went on to be a Hall of Fame manager, winning, World Series with Oakland and St. Louis. So he brings the guy out of retirement after a decade because he thinks he's got this team to win, and he thinks La Russa is the team to win it with. And you're talking. I agree to an extent what some of the things that you're talking about, but it's very obvious right now that there needs to be a different standard in the clubhouse. And like going back to what I was talking about with Buck is the kind of guy who holds those standards. That's why every organization Buck Showalter has been at, he took these teams from being losing teams, whether it was the Yankees, whether it was the Orioles, whether it was the Diamondbacks, and now with the Mets, he's taken them all from underperforming, and in a relatively quick amount of time, he's turned them into winners because of the standards that he sets in the clubhouse.
And I understand what you're saying. I think part of our conversation right now is about how much stock you put in the manager, and the White Sox are.
And I think it's harder at the big league level because these are guys getting paid money and they're supposed to have some of their own self-motivation. But again,
sure, but
Mets weren't great last year. Look at where they've been, in the same amount of time this year.
But the signing of La Russa, I think, is what spurred the White Sox out of being a cohesive unit. You look at the 05 White Sox that won a championship. They didn't have a bunch of all-stars on that team. They didn't have a bunch of Hall of Famers on that team. But each person played their role. Ozzie kept it loose enough for them throughout the whole season.
They had Ozzie.
And so I understand your point. And I think that when they signed La Russa, as a big fan, I almost was like, wow, we have a lot of good parts. And I guess they really aren't committed to winning is the vibe that I got as a fan.
Wow. And that was when they hired him.
The day they hired him. Because at that point, A.J. Hinch was still available, the former Astros manager, who's now in Detroit. And they've been hot and they've been playing better with less talent than the White Sox. So when they didn't get him and they went with La Russa for no reason except for personal issues, they put their personal Reinsdorf put his personal
Alex Cora as well.
Yeah. They put Reinsdorf put his personal issue ahead of winning. And as a fan, that already that set me off into a negative headstorm about this whole team anyway. But then so last year they had a chance, they made the playoffs, they lost to the Astros, still a good season for where they were. And if they had just added a couple of pieces, an outfielder and a second baseman, that team would have been loaded. And instead, they pretty much stayed pat and didn't do much. And it's like, again, you're not committed to winning then because you had to do something. And they traded Craig Kimbrell for A.J. Pollock. Nice little piece, not the answer to your problems. And they only signed Pollock because Eloy got hurt already.
Yeah.
Or made that trade because of injuries in the outfield.
Bobby, I'm just impressed that people have hung on and stayed on to listen and watch us argue about
Baseball.
because
Yeah,
typically
thank you
we
everyone for the baseball comments.
we didn't get a fencing comment at all in the chat tonight. So,
Especially from Irish Chi-Town that said I was correct. That's my first
That's
nice
right.
comment.
that's right. You got some. All right. Well, that's going to be the end of the week for us. Of course, Brian and Vince. I don't know if Ryan's going to be with them tomorrow. I think Ryan will be back tomorrow with the mailbag Friday afternoon, and big weekend coming up. So looking forward to that. And then we'll be back, of course, on Monday and run right through the week as we've got plenty more. We've got the All-Star break, Home Run Derby, the Jeter stuff, all that stuff.
We'll find a way to talk about conference realignment again.
That's right. Sooner or later, we'll review Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction and White Sox are our two side hustles here on this show.
That's right. Yeah. Derek Calmer said, LOL, I just got here. Let's do a recap.
We can do that real quick.
What you might want to do, Derek, is just wait till this video posts on archive and just start over from the beginning. It's like having it on the DVR. I guess the long and the short of it is more people voted for join the Big Ten and take the national championship. Although, again, most of the comments were to the contrary, but the people who voted on the Twitter poll said otherwise. Now, I guess the one thing about that is we don't know for sure how many of those people were actually Notre Dame fans. You could easily have some other people sneaking in there and just say, join the Big Ten, because they want them to join the Big Ten. But
Michigan fans.
That's right. All right. Well, have a great weekend. Don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe to us, and rate and comment and all that kind of good stuff on the podcast as well. Bobby, have a good weekend.
You too. Don't do anything I wouldn't do.
I'll try not to. And
not a gray area.
I'm actually going to see John Mulaney in Chicago this weekend. Wow. Comedian. You ever seen any of his stuff on Netflix or any of that?
Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff. I'm surprised you're into him.
He's funny. He's very funny.
That's why I'm surprised you're into him.
Unlike you. All right. Have a good weekend. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.